certainly one of the key things is where he was found not in the caves as they thought, and as you said, but in this compound, of a compound that they say was built special for him, that was quite elaborate. Today we're hearing from former Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf, who's revealing today, if this is true, that U.S. forces crossed the border and violated the sovereignty of Pakistan. So we'll have to get more details on exactly how this went down, and also the perennial question of how much Pakistan was involved or knew of what was going on. The CBC's Melissa Fung in Washington, thank you so much. We'll check in with you again throughout the afternoon. Also, for those of you watching with us here, stay on the CBC News Network for more. Tonight, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, our Washington correspondent Susan Bonner will host a special program following the latest developments on the death of Osama Bin Laden. After that, Connect with Mark Kelly will kick off special coverage on the election. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, our chief correspondent Peter Mansbridge hosts Canada Votes. You can catch that on both the CBC News Network and CBC Television. Well, Barack Obama said in his speech last night that the U.S. counterterrorism cooperation with Pakistan helped lead the CIA to Osama Bin Laden's hideaway. Let's hear more about that. Let's hear a little bit more of what President Obama had to say in this historic speech.
Tonight, I called President Zardari, and my team has also spoken with their Pakistani counterparts. They agree that this is a good and historic day for both of our nations. And going forward, it is essential that Pakistan continue to join us in the fight against al-Qaeda and its affiliates.
Osama bin Laden, again, found in a fortress-sized compound not far from Pakistan's capital city, an affluent area, not a cave, as so many people have thought he would be found in. Today, there are questions being raised about whether Pakistani security forces knew the whereabouts of the world's most wanted man. Susan Ormiston has been looking into that, and she joins me with more on that story from London. Susan, a U.S. official says there was, in fact, Hillary Clinton saying there was no indication that Pakistan knew bin Laden was staying at a large compound near Islamabad in Abbottabad. What is the worldwide consensus on this, and what's the information coming in?
I don't think we can be reliably certain that either Pakistan knew something or didn't know anything. Many of the people I've spoken to today and listened to reaction around the world are raising big questions about Pakistan's lack of intelligence on the one hand or complicity on the other in harboring al-Qaeda. This compound was literally under the noses of the Pakistan Army, 200 meters from the foremost training institute and not far away, about an hour from the capital, as you said. Army regiments live in Abbottabad. Senior Army officials retire there. I spoke to a senior counterterrorism analyst here in Britain this afternoon, and he told me he found it inconceivable, was his quote, that Pakistan knew nothing about this. And Pakistanis themselves are asking whether the ISI, that's the intelligence arm of the army, what did they know? And if they didn't know anything, how come? It's the view of many that the ISI would have made inquiries about such a large complex being built 5 years ago, purpose-built, who was living there. The locals may not have inquired, but certainly the intelligence officials should have and would have. So I don't think it's clear at all that Pakistan didn't know anything. It may be that this is a strategy for public consumption, because it's awkward either way, Carol, that either Pakistan knew something and didn't do anything, or didn't know anything, neither, but puts Pakistan in a very good light. But let's remember that the U.S. has said it did not tell Pakistan about its army, about its attack yesterday on this compound, and that in itself is quite extraordinary. This is sovereign ground. The U.S. is not at war against Pakistan. They in fact did cross over into their territory and launch a very sophisticated military attack. If they didn't tell the Pakistani army, it seems to many observers that they didn't trust that the information wouldn't be leaked out.
Or, you know, it's interesting how you put this. They lose either way. We're also hearing that, you know, from Hillary Clinton and others, that it was their initial intelligence that put them on the trail of this courier. So perhaps Pakistan didn't want to know if the Americans were coming over the border to get Osama bin Laden.
You're right. That is a possible interpretation, because they would have to explain to their own citizens why they were allowing a foreign power to come in and carry out very sophisticated warlike attacks on their soil. However, I'm not sure it's exactly clear who led to this intelligence. The Americans are saying, on the one hand, that there was cooperation on intelligence gathering, but it's not very specific. What they did say is they gathered information about this courier that led them to bin Laden through detainees who talked, some from Guantanamo, some undoubtedly from the army base Bagram just outside of Kabul. So it's not exactly clear how much that the Pakistani intelligence gave them specific to this attack.
Susan, let me ask you this, because often after, you know, the Taliban, or Al-Qaeda, I should say, often after Al-Qaeda launches an operation, we'll hear from one of their spokespeople. Has there been any reaction from Al-Qaeda operatives to the death of Osama bin Laden?
The reaction is really interesting, because some would argue today that Al-Qaeda Central, as it calls, has been neutralized over the past few years. That in fact Osama bin Laden wasn't in operational control of Al-Qaeda as we knew it at the time of 9/11. But we are hearing threats, as expected, from other groups. For example, a Syrian-born Sunni cleric, Omar Bakri in Lebanon, has warned that there will definitely be retaliation of the same level, he said, as September 11th, and that's why America should be afraid. Also, we heard this morning from the TTP, that's the Taliban movement of Pakistan, telling Reuters news agency that President Zardari of Pakistan and the Pakistani army will now be the first targets, and America the second target. So these types of threats are coming in, and more worrisome, say some, are these Al-Qaeda branches, like the ones that we know about in Yemen and North Africa, who seem bent on retaliating against the U.S. and other Western countries, Canada included, because they are at war against the Taliban in Afghanistan. And there have been several calls today from the UK and the US warning their citizens in other countries like Pakistan that there could be retaliation, and to be on guard. And the embassies of the UK and the US are being told to review their security operations. In fact, the CIA director said this afternoon that it is likely that there will be some attempt to avenge the death of bin Laden.
The CBC's Susan Ormiston in London. Thank you, Susan. Story developing this hour on the campaign trail. There are reports today of what appears to be cases of election fraud in Ontario. Elections Canada says it has received reports that someone is telephoning voters and telling them to go to non-existent polling stations.